Never. A distant catcall crowed back. I swear to God I'm gonna gut you one of these days. Now that she mentioned it, Siegfried had been wondering about that. Sorry, but are you sure you're not the berserker here, miss? He inquired. In that moment, the ancient hero inadvertently trod upon the proverbial landmine that was Mordred's shallow confidence. Not in others, but rather herself. The result was nothing short of explosive. With a harsh clank, her helmet disengaged and slammed down onto her shoulders, parting to expose a ferocious scowl and the young visage within. Oh, perhaps he'd gone a tad too far. Hell no, I'm Saber. The rest of his words dawned upon her moments later, turning her gaze to hooded aqua slits. Did you just call me a girl? Beat of awkward silence followed. Aren't you? Oi? Siegfried had meant no offense with his words, of course. It was simply his way of speaking. From his point of view, this girl couldn't possibly be Saber of Red. She was too wild, too fierce, too feral. Moreover, she'd already proven herself lacking when it came to the art of the blade. Strong to be sure, but a master swordswoman she was not. She gloried in this battle while he merely accepted it as his duty. Curiosity had compelled him to come here, to meet the man who professed to help. Now he'd inadvertently provoked the very servant he'd been trying to avoid. Clarent howled, red with rage, vicious scarlet sparks scrawling over its edge. Get over here! Mana burst propelled her forward at breakneck speed. Liberal application of that same skill sent her sword snarling into Saber Black, catapulting him into the earth.
Something crunched in his side as the flat of her sword cannoned against him. It took nearly all Siegfried's might to resist being blown away on the spot. Quite suddenly he found himself crossing blades with someone quite likely to kill him if he made so much as a single slip.
And yet, despite the danger, Siegfried hesitated. What are you doing, Saber? Gordaz's voice growled at him through their shared link. The enemy is right in front of you. Pay attention.
Ah, there he was again. Unworthy, a small voice hissed in the back of his brain.
Siegfried grit his teeth against it and tried to devote his attention to the fight, to no avail. Thoughts wriggled out of his grasp even as he grappled with Saber of Red, threatening to betray him. All told, Gord's Muzek Igmalenia was not a good master. Not even an adequate one at that. Nor could he be called average. Fat, slovenly. Always shouting, trying to be seen. To make himself heard over others. Proud of his station, his power, ever scraping and scratching, shrieking for more, never satisfied. Even then, Siegfried had silently resolved to endure his petty tyranny. In the beginning. Then an epiphany had come upon him, recently been forced, really in the dead of night, spurred by the enigmatic assault of Berserker of Red. Meeting him now, speaking with him, had only further served to cement that belief. Why endure? He shouldn't have to tolerate this. Serving such a master would get him killed. While he did not fear a second death, he did not wish to forfeit his dream, that most cherished wish he held near and dear to his heart. It was becoming increasingly clear that his master did not share such values. No, one could even say he stood in direct opposition to them. A contractor, one that viewed him as little more than a familiar. He would not understand his dream, childish though it might be. The scene he'd made back in the throne room had made that pointedly clear. No, all told, he'd begun to find his master distasteful. Was it wrong that he wanted to kill him? Even a little, perhaps. Pay attention, dumbass. As he turned to face Saber of Red, a booted foot cannoned out of nowhere, catching him dead in center of his chest. Unprepared for such a tactic, Siegfried found himself flung backward at blistering, sent tumbling across the earth like a skipping stone. Narrowly managing to cling to Balmung, he hastily righted himself, expecting an attack at any moment. It never came. As ever, his armor of Fafnir had held firm against anything short of that blade, but he found his psyche grievously wounded by the events that just transpired. What are you doing? spacing out like that in the middle of a fight. The armored knight drawled at him, her face taut with fury. You trying to die or something? In disbelief, Siegfried balked at her.
You had a chance to kill me just now, he murmured, nearly at a loss for words. Why didn't you take it?
Ha! Now it was Mordred's turn to recoil. He was not prepared for the response that followed. In the distance, the heavens unleashed their fury in the form of a terrible catastrophe from on high, one he barely noticed. Rider of Black let out a faint squawk and scrambled for cover. But again, Siegfried couldn't bring himself to care for his fellow servant's plight. There was only the scowling maiden, somehow looming large before him, perhaps in spite of her small stature. Kill you, when you weren't looking. The hell would I do that for? In a flash of crimson steel, Clarence stabbed at the empty air before them, jabbing furiously at his face, as though it were trying to skewer him despite the distance between them. No way! I want to end you fair and square. Her gaze bored into him, rooting him where he stood. It wouldn't be worth it otherwise. Now stand up and fight me, Saber of Black, or I'll drag you to your feet. Aye. Grim smile blossomed on his tanned visage.
So, she held some semblance of honor after all. He could understand that much. Respect it, even.
Servant of Red, whomever you are, I'm glad to have met you. Here was one who did not flinch from their principles. No matter their fate, no matter their master, they held true to their beliefs. It felt like a breath of fresh air. Straightening his back and keenly aware of how close he'd come to death just now, Siegfried readied his blade. A distant explosion shook the earth anew, but this time he paid it no mind. He only had eyes for the knight standing before him. I would know your name, he inquired cordially.
He expected a firm denial, a rebuttal of his request at the least.
Instead, she graced him with a rough laugh and planted her greatsword in the ground between them. Armored hands descended, resting firmly upon its great hilt. Straightening her back, she tossed her hair still freed from its ponytail and snorted a contemptuous strand out of her eyes. Planting her feet, she squared her shoulders and declared her true name for all to hear. I am Mordred, the one and true heir of Arthur Pendragon. Her very voice resonated with pride and determination. The Knight of Rebellion? She paused, considering him anew, those dauntless eyes greeting his, daring him to meet her challenge. Now I ask thee, Saber of Black. The very air vibrated with the voice of her charisma, such that the stoic servant momentarily found himself stricken on the spot. Who art thou? In the end, Siegfried couldn't help but respond to such sincerity. He simply didn't have it in him to resist her honesty. Something in that wild sight of hers reminded him of his younger self, wild and fierce. How long had it been since his eyes held such fire? The thought sparked a strange feeling in his malformed heart. No, not quite a feeling, but rather a yearning, a reminder of his dream. No, you idiot! Perhaps sensing his intent, Gords raged at him. What are you doing? I forbid it. I command you to act.
Something snapped in Siegfried.
You, and what command seals? Severing their telepathic link, he hauled himself upright and inhaled deeply. After so many years asleep to himself, it felt like coming up for a breath of fresh air. Hey, I recognize that look, Mordred sighed knowingly. You've got a shitty master, huh? Had she anything other than his adversary, Siegfried might have actually embraced her on the spot. Odd that he'd struck up a kinship with the enemy. His polar opposite, yet more alike him than she knew. Some small part of him must have longed for a fight like this. For in this moment he felt fulfilled. He didn't merely want to fight, he wanted to help others, of his own volition. Without being asked, this wee slip of a girl had reawakened that dream deep within him. Mordred, he began slowly, choosing his words with care. Saber of Red, I owe you my thanks. I'd nearly forgotten myself. What can I say? The blonde preened and thumbed her nose, swelling with praise. I'm a people person. She most assuredly was not, but she wasn't about to deny a compliment. With the merest flick of her wrist, she plucked her heavy blade from the soil and leveled its honed edge towards Siegfried once more.
Still haven't answered my question, though.
He hadn't had he. I am Siegfried. He'd never been one to boast of his own exploits. His name was enough. Recognition dawned in those wild eyes all at once, framed by a hint of admiration and surprise. As he looked on, a slow, euphoric smile blossomed across her visage. Those wide eyes narrowed intently upon his cherished sword, as though seeing it for the first time. Perhaps it would have been wiser to conceal his name after all. The look she was giving him now was actually predatory, if he was truly honest with himself. Still, he couldn't bring himself to regret his words, even after what followed. Ho? Somehow, Mordred managed a murderous mule as she settled into an unfamiliar stance. I'd better watch out for that sword of yours, then. Now. That keen gaze turned back to him then, perhaps sensing the seed of concern within. Don't worry, she beamed. I won't go for your back. Not my style. Siegfried released a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. You have my thanks, Saber of Ree. No, Mordred? This time, her laughter rang true. In that case, Swift upturn of her blade sent a shiver of dread shooting down Siegfried's spine. Allow me to greet that fervor of yours with some of my own. By rights, it looked as though she were offering her weapon to the heavens. Siegfried knew better. As he looked on in quiet awe, the air turned blood red around Saber of Red. No, beyond red. As though the world itself were suddenly stained by some sinister grudge he didn't wholly understand. All of it, stemming from that sword. Large protrusions clicked back as one, bathing the blade in eerie crimson relief. Siegfried knew the sight for what it was, and knew he must respond in kind. If he didn't, only destruction awaited. O sword, let thee be filled. Solemnly, he raised Balmung above his head, activating the jewel within its hilt. A twilight miasma began to emanate from the blade, ebbing and flowing wildly. To Mordred's eyes, it wasn't so much a pillar of light as it was an aura radiating from the Servant of Black, a glowing ring building more and more as she looked on. The dragon in her recognized the danger for what it was. The diluted blood of ancients snarling a warning against the ancient enemy it now faced. And still, her foe continued to chant, "The evil dragon will fall." This was true ether, hailing from the age of the gods itself. All will be separated into light and shadow.
Few could hope to stand against it.
The world will now reach the twilight. Mordred merely grinned.
Aha, finally.
Against all hope, beyond all fear, Siegfried's opponent shifted anew. Rather, her blade. Her weapon uttering unholy sounds as it began to transform into something words couldn't describe. Bathed in this chilly elegy, warped by the sheer power of the grudge fostered upon it, her hatred began to twist Clarence's beautiful form into something wicked, not a sword meant to save, or a weapon to inspire. In a word, calamity. Red lightning flickered about that unsightly form, soaked in streamers of sickening scarlet. With each passing moment it grew larger still, that bloody radiance rising above her in a wrathful pillar of pure rage. Gritting her teeth, Mordred stomped her right foot against the soil, splitting the earth in twine. Here I come, Siegfried. Sudden insight told him what would transpire when she brought that blade down. Clarence! With that lone declaration, her sword's hideous form reached the epicenter of its arc, inflicting its bloody radiance upon the sky in a flash of light. A surging wave with the simple purpose of annihilation. The heavens trembled, crimson lightning falling in a single masterstroke. In mere moments it would be upon him, a towering pillar of doom he had no hope of defending against. Yes, his only recourse was to attack. To meet her noble phantasm with his own was the only path to victory. All other paths lead to disaster. In his current state, he could not fire off Balmung rapidly. Not in this degraded state. He would have one shot. One opportunity. Perhaps Mordred knew this, had deliberately provoked him into a head-on collision. In the end, it mattered not. Tactical thinking had never been his strong suit. He was, and had always been, a warrior. 2 steps carried him forward, his body leaping to meet the roaring red menace. Distantly, he felt Gordez's command spell tug at him, but he stubbornly tore through the shackles cast upon him by his master. Every cell, every fiber of his being stood united in this singular moment. It was too late to step back from the abyss now, nor could he have done so even had he wanted to. With his heart resolved, he took up the final line of his chant and struck. Fall! Azure swelled around his beloved sword, calm and serene, pure as a midnight breeze. This was a holy blade, a slayer of dragons wielded by perhaps the greatest dragon slayer ever to exist. It stood steadfast in its purpose, its resolve unshackled by its master. A surging wave with the simple purpose of destruction. Unlike Mordred's Clarent Blood Arthur, it was not a straight line ripped from the tip of the sword, nor could it be called a grudge. It was a simple earnest wish, a surge of twilight centered around him, shooting off a semicircular slash wave. Ballet. Mordred, cut low. Blood Arthur. Siegfried swung high. Mung. Red greeted blue. Crimson intercepted azure. All the world became light, and in response, tiny, flawed existence awoke for the first time. Awaken, little homunculus. Spurred on by a woman's voice, the artificial existence opened its eyes. Suspended in viscous fluid, it beheld its world through the glass, alone and confused. The voice had spurred it from its dream, but now it was nowhere to be found. Curious. Who was it? Where was it? Why was it here? A host of questions bombarded its fractured psyche, only just now stirring to sentience. Weightless, it turned its head to search for the one who had woken it. Strands of blurry ashen hair caught its gaze, and for a moment its confusion faded, replaced by idle curiosity. White? Is my hair white? Fascinating. Though this thought initially proved, it was curiosity that seized the reins of the homunculus's body once more. Small hands rose, the faint outlines of tiny fingers made visible in the wan light provided. Stiff muscles responded reluctantly to its commands, moving.
The room beyond the glass proved equally dark, interposed by strange green cylinders not unlike its own. Body dangled within, lifeless forms.
Snatches of conversation flitted through its ears in the dark room, muffled by the water.
Ride this one next.
Yours stood. I'll prepare her. Intrigued, it searched for them leave, until its gaze alighted upon a pair of hand-driven carts. Pushed by a pair of equally blurry figures clad in white, the homunculus couldn't see their faces, nor the contents of the carts themselves. Disappointed and more than a touch vexed, the entity turned its gaze inward, trying to find a reason, an answer for its existence. Do you wish to see, then? The voice came again, startling the homunculus. To understand your situation, is that your wish? Wish? My purpose is the granting of wishes. It is my function. Is this your wish? Why can you grant wishes? The homunculus wondered back at it.
Even for one just born, it seemed almost too good to be true. The smallest pause followed its innocent inquiry.
I do not know. The presence must have mistook its silence as acceptance then, for a strange calmness settled over it. Understood. A pleased hum entered its mind, adjusting. I grant you sight and understanding of your current situation. What is your next wish? Startled bubbles rose in the tank. Next. Even with this confirmation, it came as something of a surprise then when its vision suddenly and inexplicably cleared, granting terribly clarity it hadn't known itself to lack. As though a veil had suddenly been lifted, so too did it find that it could see the world beyond, as well was all the strange wonders the room held. It could clearly see the others now, countless bodies suspended in stasis. How did it know that word, similar to its own? Tiny palms pressed against the glass and pushed, straining for a better view. Was it imagining things, or did one of them see it? Did one of them raise a hand and wave? Did one smile at them? Did one speak? Did it? It did. Across the way, it found itself gazing at a slender woman, a beauty beyond compare, majesty beyond reason. A curtain of pale white hair lofted around her body, forming an angelic halo of white about her head. That same head tilted aside, regarding it with almost motherly concern. What was a mother? The homunculus felt unworthy of it. Who are you? I do not remember my name. You may address me as Grail. My information suggests the use of this form may calm you. Impossible as it seemed, it could hear her despite the distance between them, in spite of the water in its ears. Small children often appreciate the presence of a mother in their lives. This is... How? The entity known as Grail regarded it coolly. Excess energy remains from the last war waiting to be used. Wishes can still be granted after a fashion. Small dreams, tiny hopes. She clarified, and again though her mouth moved, the words themselves transmitted directly to its brain. As you are to be my first terminal, I thought it only best to grant you this limited function. Worry not, your second will not possess this ability. This is my gift to you alone. That's not what concerns me. It was too much to absorb, too much to take in. To simply awake and find itself thrust into this strange new world. It was overwhelming. A slender finger rose, pointing towards a darkened portion of the room. Ah! The carts had been headed there, had they not? Baffled, the homunculus followed their gaze, wondering what the Grail as it were wished to show them. When it finally beheld the contents of that shadowy corner, however, wonder gave way to horror. It saw the carts and all they'd been carrying. Impossibly, the rank stench of decayed flesh reached its nose inside the tube, causing it to gag. Because it saw them. It saw them all. And it knew what it was looking at. Bodies. Pit of corpses. Endless, faceless deaths. This was to be its fate. Then. An endless roar pounded in its ears, screaming with the fury of 1,000 seas. Red eyes bulged explosively, and the fear rushed back, throttling all sense. Blood frothed on pale lips as magic circuits activated in a fit of terror. Hope evaded the little homunculus, sending its tiny heart beating its mouth, parting in a silent cry. No. Small fists beat against the glass. Move! Do you wish to escape? Grail inquired politely. Yes! Glass shattered. Darkness followed shortly. Zero. Oh hell, that was a big explosion. Hope Mordred got out from under it. Naruto beheld the clash of the noble phantasms, and couldn't help but marvel at them. Well, shit, he winced, glad I wasn't summoned as Saber. Otherwise that'd be me over there. Even at this distance and partially obscured by a valley of towering earthen spires, the blasts were truly a sight to behold. Blue-crimson collided in unison and merged into a towering column of violet light that roared into the heavens, obliterating anything unlucky enough to be caught in its path. Dark clouds that once threatened rain found themselves obliterated as the two sabers collided with one another. It just kept going, a final salute that seemed to stretch on forever. Each had poured their all into it. their hearts, their very souls into this final attack. And only one would be crowned the victor. In all honesty, he really didn't want to piss off whoever survived that attack. Siegfried, simply for the sake of that impossible blade of his, a terrible weapon unlike no other. Mordred, because if she could tank a blast like that, he was honestly going to be a little frightened of her. Edging away from the earthen alcove he'd created for himself amidst the valley of stakes, the blonde risked a glance outside. Really, why am I always surrounded by scary women? Kazik Bay. A muddy stream of nearly 2,000 spears hearkened to Vlad's call and descended upon Naruto's hiding place, raining down on him with the force of 1,000 falling meteors. No. Meteors couldn't possibly be guided with such pinpoint accuracy. He could only think of them as arrows, a ceaseless rain of deadly ebony shafts designed to skewer him if he lingered in one place too long. In hindsight, Atalanta might have taken offense to that comparison, but in that moment he couldn't think of them as anything else. Her arrows were lethal if nothing else, and Vlad's volley was well on its way to finding their mark. Can't you not right now? Even as he ripped himself free of his mooring to alight upon a nearby stalagmite, a fresh volley hounded him like a blood-starved beast, tearing great strips of clothing from his cloak and forcing the young warrior to leap up then away, lest he find his hide skewered anew. Wind howled in his face as he tumbled forward, blue eyes squinting against the wind. A stray thought channeled chakra to his palms and the soles of his feet, providing him fine purchase when he inevitably collided with another towering earthen spike. Clinging to this new haven with all fours, he flung a glance toward their source. Just how long can you keep this up for? As long as it takes, Invader. Framed against the waning light of the moon, Vlad sneered up at him, bearing that twisted lance before his coat like some fell javelin. Surrounded by a hellish landscape, he truly lived up to his title. With so many stakes proliferating the soil around them, there was scarcely a safe place to land. The few that remained were swiftly swallowed whenever he found himself unlucky enough to tread there. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. One could only guess how Atalanta was faring against Ryder on this terrain. A clawed fist smashed down into one of the larger pillars, tearing a massive chunk of the coarse material free. Hefting it aloft, he cocked his arm back, ready to throw. An impressive feat of strength, and Vlad arched a slender eyebrow as he gazed upon the hulking, if somewhat improvised spear the blonde had just procured for himself. There wasn't so much as a hint of fear upon that pale visage as that massive shadow loomed large over him. No, not even a glimmer. What do you intend to do with that thing now that you've broken it? Surely you don't mean to throw it at me. You know what the outcome will be, don't you? Naruto clicked his tongue. Hey, Master. Apologizing in advance. Through their contract, Jean caught his thoughts immediately. Through that shared bond, he glimpsed a hint of dark exultance on her part. No, she hummed back. It's fine, take as much energy as you need. And Berserker? Placid blue eyes narrowed to cerulean slits as the tension began to build in his shoulders. Make him pay for every word. Her iron tone sent a silent shiver of anticipation shooting down his spine. Delight clawed its way across his visage as she commanded him, sapphire orbs snapping back into sinister slitted scarlet. Savagery twisted that whiskered face into a rictus of a grin. Gods, you really are the best master for me. Then he let it fly. As expected, Lancer didn't budge when the shadow fell. Rather, he stood his ground and raised his weapon to greet the falling tower. As expected, it had never been his intent to pierce him with this to begin with. Hurling one of his own stakes at him, no matter how large, meant nothing here. Least of all when Vlad controlled the territory around them. Indeed, Lancer flicked his wrist aside in a seamless motion, separating the earthen spire into harmless halves on either side of him. In that regard, his attack proved a resounding success. Not so the snarling sphere looming behind it. Far less its owner, surging ever forward. golden eyes widened in surprise. Clever of you, however. Without moving his head, Vlad summoned a pair of stakes to defend his regal visage from harm. On the surface, it seemed a flimsy defense, folded before him in the telltale shape of an X, one destined to fold beneath his assault. Imagine his surprise and anger when they not only withstood this blow, but physically cut out into his flesh, grievously wounding him in a tri-pronged assault to spite his suicidal charge. His vision blazed red as a lucky hit took his right eye. Another opened a deep gouge across Naruto's cheek as Lancer's weapon bit into his face. But he powered on, heedless of the agony burning through his face. In that moment, Naruto finally glimpsed a hint of victory. Odama Rasengan!
For the first time since their battle had begun, Vlad III cried out in genuine pain.
Rather than try to bowl through his defenses as Lancer had expected, the solid sphere, much to his great dismay, skittered under his impenetrable barrier to strike him full-on in the chest. At such close proximity, there was nothing he could do to defend himself. He could only endure the unexpected hit, in the vain hope of tanking whatever damage Berserker inflicted upon that fleeting moment, the brief millisecond before impact. The Lord Impaler had time enough for one fleeting thought. A small, imperceptible smile flitted across his visage. Well done? Then the howling sphere collided with his flesh and hurled him away, as though he'd been backhanded by the palm of an angry god. Ripped from his perch, he soared backwards through the air, earthen, soil, and stone disintegrating while he tumbled wildly across the countryside. Naruto wasn't willing to wait for his foe to recover. Even as his signature technique carried Vlad away into the distance, he willed a pair of clones to his side and prepared a Rasen shuriken. He wasn't willing to trust Sage Mode in these uncontrolled conditions, not when it had already failed him once against Karna. Perhaps later he'd have a chance to figure out why the planet kept rejecting him. Not enough. Twin stakes shot out before the technique could take shape, eviscerating the copies and forcing him to retreat, lest he meet the same fate. Snarling, he vaulted away. Sheesh, this is ridiculous. Fucking fame boost. To his dismay, the battered Lancer was already climbing to his feet, one hand extended in spite of his injuries. No, not even wounded, he realized. Though his body was clearly scuffed and dirtied, though his once proud coat lay shorn around his shoulders, though there was clearly a deep gouge where he'd made contact, Vlad remained far from defeated. Not that he'd expected a servant to go down in a single hit, but this. Well, that isn't fair at all. Oh, crap, papaya. On second thought. A faint shout served as the sole herald of Atalanta's arrival. From there, the sight of her battered form plummeting from the sky was enough to jar him back to the present. In the distance, he glimpsed what might have been Ryder, atop some winged beast his eyes couldn't discern. How in the world? Never mind how she'd gotten up there to begin with. The notion that Ryder had actually managed to injure the elusive archer set his pulse racing. Unlike him, she lacked any means of stalling herself in mid-flight. While he could at least use a clone as an unlikely springboard to cushion her fall, she lacked any such means of recourse to save herself, much less her honor. Lancer had no such qualms. After that last attack, Vlad was all too eager to repay his earlier temerity. There you are, Archer. Fall to me. Vlad didn't waste the opportunity. A flick of his fingers sent a river of jagged death hurtling her way. True enough, she spun to unleash a hail of arrows to meet several of stakes, but the rest rushed on, overwhelming her defenses and intent upon having her heart. Sparks scrawled across her bow as she prepared her noble phantasm in retaliation, but anyone could see she wouldn't be able to release it in time. Even had she done so, the storm might have overwhelmed her still. His body moved. Oh, for the love of... Without a thought for his own safety, Naruto leaped upward. Ground burst beneath his feet as he hurtled into the air at breakneck speed. From Atalanta's viewpoint, his body registered as little more than a crimson blur. Strong arms closed around her and spun, placing a strong back between her and the deluge. Her vision turned black. Pain snarled up his spine as a trio of stakes wedged themselves between his shoulders, but he accepted them stoically, weathering the storm as they plummeted to the ground. Even then, he didn't release Atalanta, tucking her head against his chest. Stakes shattered against hardened skin, clawing across his face, but he never wavered until they hit the dirt. Lost in the maze of Lancer's stakes, they were granted a momentary reprieve. Straightening her back, Atalanta shook herself mightily in his arms. "I didn't need your help, Berserker," she huffed. Her ally refused to respond to her criticism. "Aren't you going to say something?" Silence reigned supreme. "Naruto?" "Nothing." "Release me!" she kicked out against his chest, but he didn't acquiesce. The idea that she'd been saved was galling enough, more so that she'd actually required rescue, but the fact that her ally had yet to release her proved unbearable. Humiliating even. It was her own fault. She'd been fool enough to grab onto Ryder's beast when it took to the air, and it had been she who lost her grip and fell back to earth. She'd known full well she wouldn't be able to fire off her noble phantasm in time to counter Lancer's attack. Yet her proud spirit still rankled at being the damsel in distress, all the same. Something hard several really was poking against her chest, but in her anger she paid them no heed. "Stop fooling around already." Exasperated by what she interpreted as willful silence, she attempted to wriggle free of him, to no avail. His grip was iron. Those strong arms remained locked tightly against her. Then her head knocked against his chest, and she realized just why her erstwhile ally hadn't budged. His heart wasn't beating. Alarmed, she risked a glance downward. Her ears flattened against her head in distress. Green eyes widened when she beheld his grievous wounds. "You fool!" Those hard things she'd felt poking her earlier were Vlad's stakes. Jutting through his back and into his chest, they'd stopped just short of piercing her body. No, she realized. The blood on her didn't belong to her, but him. Aghast, she intensified her struggles. If he'd actually died saving her, Saber would never let her hear the end of it. More than that, for him to willingly lay down his life for her without a second thought. All at once, his arms tightened around her. "I'm fine," a raspy hiss greeted her. "Just give me a second." Her ears shot ramrod straight. "By Artemis, how are you still alive?" A low wheeze answered her. "Noble phantasm's complicated. Gonna let go of you now." Twitching arms released Atalanta, allowing her to crawl out of his grasp. She did so reluctantly. The sight that followed turned her stomach. Slowly, painstakingly, Berserker began to tear each stone spear free from his torso, heedless of the holes he made. Though the wounds healed, the pain on his face did not. She could clearly see that while his regeneration had mended his body, the agony of mangled flesh and bone knitting themselves back together clearly remained. She couldn't imagine what the pain must be like, to experience the hell of not only enduring a mortal wound, but being forced to heal from it mere moments later. Just what kind of hero had he been in his living days? Watching him climb to his feet, a note of discord sang through her heart. "Why did you save me back there, Berserker?" Lazy blue eyes turned to regard her. "'Cause I wanted to." Muscle jumped in Archer's jaw. Despite their alliance, she knew precious little about him. Frankly, she wasn't sure she wanted to know more. He professed an odd charm and possessed an endearing fondness for children, alongside a strange penchant for madness. That was the extent of her knowledge. The idea of eventually fighting him for the sake of her wish was unappealing. He'd already proven himself to be stronger than her, if not more durable. Anyone capable of tanking hits like that and standing up wasn't someone she wanted to cross swords, or arrows in her case, with. If it came down to a fair fight, he'd likely win. Could he even be killed? Perhaps, Mordred had been right to call him a zombie after all. You're going to be difficult about this, aren't you? Those very same orbs narrowed as he smiled. Immeasurably. When he offered her his hand, she reluctantly accepted it. Rough fingers clasped her wrist and hauled her to feet. The warmth of his fingers felt clearly even through the cold steel of her gloves. By the time he'd turned back to the battlefield, his wounds were all but closed, save for a few faint tears in his torso. Tattered sleeves rose and fell, his arms crossing loosely behind his head as he surveyed the maze of stakes surrounding them. Lancer would be upon them soon, of that there was no doubt. But for now the servants of Black seemed to be waiting. For what? She knew not. Having trouble with Ryder? He inquired. She's surprisingly hard to pin down, the archer groused. That much is true. What her opponent lacked in strength she made up for in technique, boasting strange, noble phantasms and all manner of odd abilities. Throw in that infuriating mount, and the huntress was nearly at her wit's end. That mere slip of a girl. Were it not for those, she would have won their battle long ago. Sure, you're not going easy on her because she's your junior. Naruto prodded. Atalanta visibly bridled at the insinuation. I have done no such thing, and you know it. No, I understand. The blonde's head bobbed in faux agreement. Far be it from me to stand in the way of true love. Well, he certainly knew how to rile her up, if nothing else. Wound or not, I will shoot you. And I'd probably let you, he snarked. Another time, perhaps. Go on, then. Find Ryder. This is my fight. But your wounds. We'll be fine, the blonde reassured her. Trust me, I've endured worse than this. Besides... His hand rose, flashing his remaining command seals at her. Jade's eyes widened as she realized precisely what Berserker intended to do. Her first instinct was rage, to lash out at him and lop that very hand from his wrist. It was only her limited understanding of him that prevented Atalanta from doing so. I'm not alone, remember. On a whim, she darted back to him and laid a hand on his shoulder. Don't call Jack. Aye. Blonde brow rose in mild consternation. What? Please don't. The words tumbled out of her in a rush. She's just a child. If you make her fight Lancer, she'll die. She didn't know that, of course. Neither of them did. She may very well be the key to bringing him down, but in her heart of hearts, she couldn't bear to put her in danger unless absolutely necessary. Perhaps not even then. Every fiber of her being rebelled against it. She'd sooner die than deliberately place a child in danger, not when it could be avoided. If Naruto willingly and callously did so, no, she wouldn't be able to control herself. She's a servant, you know, Berserker reminded her carefully. I'm pretty sure she can manage in a fight like this. The huntress growled and seized him by the wrist, her expression fierce. Naruto! Oh? His gaze narrowed upon her. I see. You'd rather I die, then. For a moment, she actually thought they might come to blows. Remarkably, his shoulders slumped in defeat. All right, you win. I won't call her. She gripped him harder. Swear it. I swear on my true name, he replied readily, raising his right hand. There? Happy now? Thank you. Her tail curled between her legs, unable to meet his earnest gaze. You don't know what this means to me. Instead of the anger or disdain or even disgust she'd expected, Berserker merely granted her a small smile and light, lilting chuckle of his own. Don't mention it. Something in that expression humbled Atalanta more than words ever could. She hadn't expected him to yield. Truly, she'd thought this the end of their alliance. That he'd willingly conceded to her demands meant more to her than he could ever knew. Not only did it cement their partnership, but it elevated her opinion of him still further. Another crack etched itself into her resolve. Hairline fractures widening into fissures in her belief. He had startled her again, badly. No, not just that. He was too good, too pure. She almost caught herself reaching for him, and the moment was ruined. "Do you think yourself out of my range?" Lancer's voice reared down at them, dripping with disdain. "Allow me to disabuse you of that notion." Blue eyes narrowed. "Atalanta, get." She got. Indeed, a short leap carried her away from the battlefield. But not before she repaid his kindness. Lightning crackled across her beloved bow as she drew its string taut, a mumbled incantation leaping from her lips. Her target was sure, her aim true. At this distance, Naruto couldn't make out the words she intoned, but the shout that followed was impossible to miss all the same. A single arrow howled up into the sky in a blaze of blue light, there one moment, gone the next. An offering to the heavens, a plea for the gods' protection, the like of which few had ever seen. Phoebus' catastrophe! Heaven trembled. It was beauty.
It was grace.
Death.
Having never witnessed her noble phantasm before, Naruto found himself at something of a loss for words as the sky turned white. A servant's most devastating attack wasn't something you wanted to witness up close, certainly not when you yourself were near in the line of fire. But what could one arrow possibly do? No doubt Lancer of Black had the same thought, otherwise he would have immediately retaliated and mowed down the still fleeing archer before she could escape his range.
The heavens swelled with rain. Rain. No, not rain, he realized as the world burned with cold fury. Oh, she. For all his dislike of the deities, he would admit this much. They knew how to put on a damn good show. It wasn't light at all, but a hail of arrows so rapid, their multitude so large, that they appeared nothing short of heavenly radiance. Catastrophe. Her phantasm had been named well. The storm missed him entirely, instead plowing into Lancer's position, with all the fury of an enraged goddess. He glimpsed a flicker of black amongst the light as the servant sought to shield himself from the worst of the onslaught, for all the good it did him. If that outraged snarl was anything to go by, she'd gotten a few good shots in. Naturally, Vlad responded in kind. "Meddlesome wench."
This time Naruto knew full well what was coming, thus he was well prepared to counteract the storm of stakes. Even as 10,000 spears of pure death howled down at him from above and another broke off to target Atalanta, he dug his heels in. Indeed, though his very footing shifted beneath him in betrayal, he drew a sharp and shuddering breath. A single leap brought him between his archer and the shrieking stakes. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a door opened, sweeping sanity away. He didn't fight it. On the contrary, he embraced it.
All right, screw this. No more holding back. Then came the pain. Crimson chakra seeped from his stomach and callously crept across his chest like a jilted lover, draping him in the sweet promise of madness. Wounds stitched themselves shut of their own accord. Spires of stone and earth were forcefully ejected from his body. A single scarlet tail bloomed from the energy as the transparent cloak finished forming, assuming the likeness of an enraged kitsune wrapped around his form. Dropping down to all fours, he kneaded the chakra deep into his lungs, giving it shape and form. Not enough time for a bijudama, but it would suit his purposes all the same. The stakes reached him a moment later, and he roared. From Vlad's point of view, the attack that followed could only be comprehended as a wall in its purest form, not by any physical means, but of sound. Light itself. His assault slammed headlong into it and scattered to the winds. Wild spears of honed dirt, ricocheting in every conceivable direction. The land bent before his will, ruptured by the piercing howl, the same force of will that came for him. Ah, he understood now. Berserker had been holding back, likely still was, and he'd goaded him into revealing a glimmer of his true power. Too late he realized what was about to transpire and raised his arms against it. Another arrow sprouted from his shoulder. Snarling, he tore the sundered shaft free from his flesh and spun, searching for the source. Again, you dare, Archer of Red. Even as he turned to look for the elusive archer, Vlad realized his mistake. He'd been a fool to take his eyes off Berserker. When he turned back, all he found was a faint displacement of air, a hint of roiling dust against his towering chasm of state. He vanished completely, yet that twisted prana remained, tainting the very air with its foul miasma. So where had he gone? Here! Vlad's sixth sense shrieked a warning too late. Then a clawed fist caught him by the face, and his world erupted into red. By some fell instinct, he managed to twist his face aside to avoid losing an eye to that gouging throw. But the sudden whiplash proved damaging in its own right. His body crashed away before he could think to steady his footing, cast across the earth seemingly without end. Only by dragging his lance against the fractured soil did he manage to find some measure of relief, and grind himself to a halt. Any ordinary servant might have suffered even more severe damage after being struck at such velocity, perhaps even perished on the spot. Even a member of the saber class would have been slowed at the least. Lancer was far from ordinary. Though his hair lay in disarray and his temples pounded, though blood stained his vision, he resolutely raised his gaze and climbed back to his feet to await this worthy enemy.
He needn't wait long.
From one monster to another, you're fighting for the wrong side. Harsh crunch within the smoke signaled Berserker's arrival behind him, prompting Lancer to turn on his heel. Trying to see through me now, Berserker? He challenged. You'll find I'm not so easily swayed, unlike your dear Siegfried. Laughter trickled through the smoke. It was a deep throat sound that had no business coming from a human throat. Now, don't not kick the poor chap when he's down. After all, he's not a bad person. Just confused. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to switch sides once our saber finishes with him. Inconsequential, if he attempts turns, then I will slay him. Simple as that. You know what they say, legends are what we make of them. But you would know that, wouldn't you, Dracula? Shrouded in scarlet light, Uzumaki Naruto emerged from the fog of war, advancing resolutely towards him. Not alone. That strange, peerless energy was there with him, writhing and twisting around him, almost forming a coherent shape. The likeness of some phantasmal beast. No, he realized, a fox. Two crimson tails swayed lazily behind the blonde, also composed of that strange, seething light. What was that? It looked as though he were wearing it like some kind of tainted coat. Or was it wearing him? No, that wasn't important. That insult just now could not be tolerated. Do not call me that, Berserker. His mouth curled upward. Call you what? That. A wall of stakes erupted between them, but rather than dodge, the blonde barreled straight through them, uncaring for the minor wounds he sustained. That won't work twice. Lancer's first thought was to ready himself for an assault, but rather than get up close and personal as he'd expected, Berserker stopped short and struck further than he should have. A wave of his own answered, in the tainted form a crimson claw, visceral energy erupting from his body to cut a bloody swathe against the impaler's unprotected torso. Blood sluiced forth and the servant staggered, choking in surprise. You! Clenched knuckles slammed up into his chin, casting him away as though he weighed no more than a child. How the tides have turned. A vampire. On some level, he knew he was being baited, but he couldn't bring himself to care about that. The mere mention of that hated name stirred reminders of his wish, the desire to rectify the stain against his history made by that atrocious work. Of the taint inflicted upon his honor, no. His very name. For one whose legacy had already smeared by enemy campaigns, the notion of being compared to a blood-drinking fiend was more than galling. Until now, he'd done his best to ignore it, but this slight threatened to dash his resolve altogether. For someone to simply claim they knew him. Clawed fingers slammed into his liver, drawing a pained grunt. There's no need to be ashamed. Much to Vlad's chagrin, his opponent continued to bait him between blows. I'm familiar enough with your legend. Go on, use it. Your other noble phantasm. Do it, Give me a worthwhile fight." With a roar, Vlad cut out at him, lopping away the man's right ear. It regrew in the time him took to strike again. "I am not Dracula." "Ha! Could have fooled me." Rage knotted his bearded visage. "Cease," he howled. "I am not that abomination." Enraged, he cut out at Berserker unthinkingly, only to find his once deadly spear caught by that clawed palm. "And I'm not this." Heedless of caustic energy roiling around them, Berserker snarled back at him. "This fucking thing! This monster! I conquered this, you know. Made peace with Kurama and all that. But legends have a funny way of being twisted by time, don't they? So here I am, madder than ever. The only difference." A clawed finger drove in upon his own skull, drawing a thin line of blood against the black fabric of his headband. "Now he's gone, and I'm alone. All his power." "Now he's gone, and I'm alone. All his power. None of the companionship. I've come to terms with it. If the world thinks me mad, let them. I know the truth. Why should I care what others think of me? Why should you, for that matter?" Lies and treachery. He refused to believe such words, to accept that.
In his fury, Lancer lashed out the only way he could think of.
"Mere words," Vlad spat back. "Is that all? But what else could be expected of one with such a shoddy master?" Slow, treacherous twitch passed through the blonde's face, gone almost before the keen-eyed servant noticed. "Almost. Careful, you're making me angry." A clawed fingers rose, directing a deadly digit toward him. "You wouldn't like me when I'm angry." "Did I strike a nerve?" Lancer retorted with a wry smile. "I believe it's only fair, given you're holding back as well. Not as much of a monster as you seem, hmm? Perceptive bastard, aren't you?" To his great delight, that insufferable smile soured like rotten fruit. "This is why I have to be the one to kill you. Maker knows I've got the lives for it." There it was, another hint dropped at his feet, just waiting to be picked up. Vlad did just that. "Are you claiming to be immortal?" Golden eyes narrowed. "Surely you jest. Even you have your limits." No. He'd done precisely that, though they both knew it. Neither would acknowledge it. Lips parted in a snaggle-toothed grin. "Try me." When presented with the opportunity, Lancer didn't hesitate. He struck the moment Berserker of Red released him, and folded both arms behind his back. For the second time that night, his weapon tasted blood. Berserker perished on the spot. Rather, he should have. Taken low in the waist, Naruto accepted the blow stoically and actually staggered half a step before righting himself. The light left his eyes and he slumped, toppling backwards. Until quite suddenly, he wasn't. To Vlad's dismay, the blonde braced his feet, threw his arms further back and cackled. It was the sound of a man gone mad, a hero twisted by vile rumors and half-truths. Then he began to rise. As he straightened up, so too did his chest stitch itself back together, mending with painstaking slowness. Flesh defied gravity, and slipped back into place. Blood flowed like milk, molding across his cloak as mangled flesh slid shut. "Oh, Vlad, stop! You're splitting me in two!" He laughed, wiping a mirthful tear from his eye. "Now, do it another, I don't know, 7 times? His battered skull tilted, considering. Or was it 9? I don't remember. Already lost a few lives, and it's so hard to keep track of those these days. Lancer stared at him, a snake of dread coiling in his stomach. "What the devil are you?" he hissed blackly. Red eyes rolled back to meet his. "Et tu, Dracula. It's just as I said earlier." His voice warbled strangely just then, as though someone were speaking alongside him. Though a man or a woman, he could not discern. We're the same, you and I. The only difference is that I've accepted what I am. And what is that? As he looked on, the blonde crossed his fingers. Whatever the hell I want to be, for instance. For a fleeting instant, that bloodied visage vanished in a white plume of smoke. Coughing in shock as much as surprise, Lancer struck out with his weapon, half expecting an attack. Instead, his lance met a bare forearm, small and slender, raised in defense of its owner. That was alarming enough in and of itself, but what followed? Hi! What the actual hell? When next he reappeared and he thought he beheld a woman's face. Much to his consternation, Berserker was nowhere to be found. Rather, he found himself gazing down into the visage, this strange young woman. No, wait. Now that he peered at her, he noticed a resemblance. The whiskers, those keen red eyes, that striking blonde hair, even bound behind her head in that ridiculous style. Moreover, she completely lacked clothing of any sort beyond the strange scarlet shroud sheathing her body. Bits of errant fading smoke concealed several choice bits from view, but not for much longer. For all his resolve, a confused flush still rose to his pale cheeks. What madness is this? Clad in crimson light, the woman flashed an impish grin. I'm so sorry, she purred. Am I making you uncomfortable? Very much so, yes. Growling, he swiped at her, forcing her to bound away. Cease this foolishness at once. Fine, fine. Just kill all the fun. Put it in camps, why don't you? Cackling, she snapped her fingers. A secondary plume of smoke sprang to life around her, and this time, Vlad stayed the hell away from it. In the end, he needn't have bothered, for Berserker emerged fully clothed once more, and thankfully, striding forth from the fog as male as he'd ever been. Waiting for an excuse to use that. Again came that crazed grin, madder than ever before. You should have seen your face. Very well. I miscalculated. Vlad growled, settling into a low stance. Next time I'll aim for your head. That grin grew further still. You're assuming I'll give you another chance. When the blonde blurred, he barely reacted in time. Wall. At his command, the earth shifted, forming a small mountain of stakes at his flank. They shuddered mightily as a clawed fist crunched against them. This is nothing. He pulled harder on his reserves, creating great ravines in the earth, entire chasms swelling with stakes, spikes capable of skewering a boar, a tiger, then an elephant. Sweat beaded down his brow, but still he fought on, pulling more and more prana until the very soil buckled beneath them. Yet still his opponent didn't emerge, striking at him with lightning-quick blows, never remaining in one's place for more than a moment. Faced with such speed, it was all he could do merely to track him, much less pin him down. Some would have faltered when faced with such a foe. Not Lancer. He still held one final card, one last ace up his sleeve. Just a little more. He needed a few moments more. Coward, fight me like a man. What is a man but a miserable little pile of secrets? Now, had Naruto been possessed of his wits and a certain vital piece of intelligence, he would have realized he was the one being provoked now. Perhaps had he known the terrible truth, he would have hesitated. Realized that their battle had become a war of attrition, one he simply couldn't win by conventional means. Not only did his opponent possess nigh unlimited mana thanks to the Black faction's manipulations, but he stood at his physical peak. Not bound to one source as they were, the servants of Black could feasibly outlast any one of them and emerge the victor in this skirmish, so long as they were careful. Unfortunately, he'd never been one for strategy. If this continued at this pace, he'd be forced to use that noble phantasm whether he wanted to or not. The more he fought, the worse it became, his body becoming entranced by battle, a wide, mad grin, dominating his whiskered visage as he struck out at his opponent. He was enjoying himself, his darker half taking hold. Under any other circumstances, he wouldn't have hesitated. He wasn't particularly fond of Lancer of Black, nor did he feel any real need to bend his ear, unlike Siegfried. But with allies mixed amongst his enemies, he didn't trust himself. Madness enhancement was not an element to be inflicted lightly, and if he lost control... Thud. Abruptly, he stumbled as a series of stakes inexplicably erupted from upper torso. The sudden explosion of pain caused him to miss half a step, sending him stumbling forward. A second wave caught him, sprouting from his legs to buckle his limbs and force him to his knees. Coughing, the crimson-clad blonde glanced down at his chest, a thin, bloody line trailing out of his open mouth. Those stakes hadn't come from Vlad just now. Rather, they'd emerged from within him. As unlikely as it might seem, he knew this to be truth. Aghast, he looked upright. What the hell? A fresh spike emerged from his throat, snapping his neck back. Ack. Low laughter trickled into his ears, inflaming his confusion to a feverish degree. Straining against the pain, he willed his broken body to move. You didn't hit me. What is this? Sorry to disappoint you, but my noble phantasm aren't the stakes alone. Lancer's smug voice rose over the roaring in his ears. With your resistance, it took some time for them to form. However, the crisp sound of bootfalls pounding in his blood like the beating of a second heart. My phantasm is the very concept of being skewered by stakes itself. Therefore, a fresh wave of spikes slammed through the blonde's torso, driving the breath from his body even as his oppressor approached. As long as you remain inside my territory, you can't escape from my noble phantasm. Flicking a hand forward, Vlad offered him a rueful smile. Let's end this, Berserker of Red. Red eyes blazed white. La answer. Rather than flesh, the descending storm met crimson. Not the shroud shielding the blonde, but a veritable tower of ruby rage. The night ignited all at once, the flames of hell burning away every stake before it could strike him. More than that, it was as if the underworld itself had opened up beneath them, releasing a chorus of horrible sounds that chilled the blood. Laughter, low and hoarse and horrible, rose around him, darker than the evening itself. I really didn't want to do this, you know, he rasped, the words sounding strange and foreign in his mouth. My noble phantasm is a bit broken, you see? Blame my warped legend for that. I have to use it a certain way before I can realize its true potential. Now, as a reward for pushing me this far, I'll try to kill you quickly. Swaying drunkenly on his feet, the invader ripped himself free of the stakes and stumbled upright, uncaring for the battered state of his body. An eerie black miasma leaked from his form, further tainting the strange scarlet shroud protecting him. As Lancer looked on, a fourth tail bloomed behind Berserker's back, joining the trio of its brothers assembled there. A thorn of doubt held him back from attacking. What did this fourth tail mean? What did it signify? Why did he feel this sudden dread? Karama. What? Vlad blinked, momentarily baffled by the name. That's the name of the entity that I used to house. Those eerie blank eyes rose to meet his. The nine-tailed fox. Until now, I've only used 3 against you. Let that sink in. Under his watchful gaze, Berserker's body began to bend and twist, his back-arching fangs growing steadily more pronounced in his mouth, visibly trying to break free. Was his body breaking? Had he pushed himself past his limits at last, and reached the point of no return? Surely that must be it. Yes, of course. To think otherwise meant Berserker had an ace of his own left to play, a card he hadn't yet seen. Which meant...
You were holding back, this entire time.
Bingo! The blonde's hoarse voice hissed. Then the flesh of his whiskered face began to peel. Revealed was the current of crimson light arcing beneath. Here I come, Lord Impaler. Hope you've got enough stakes. Come now, don't be a fool. You're beaten. Even you can see that. Join me. I'm flattered, but no. No, you're going to pay for everything you said about my master. And how do you aim to make me pay? Vlad scoffed, struggling to hide the growing unease dawning within his chest. This was a bluff. Surely it had to be. With that broken body of yours, you'll only stumble and fall like the rest. Don't struggle in such an unsightly way before me. Unsightly? Berserker grinned, turned his head, slowly. You're missing the point.
These words emerged with an eerie calm. Lancer arched an eyebrow. What are you?
His entire body seemed to pulse with otherworldly radiance, as though lit from within. Gold vied with crimson, wild prana warring for a dominance within his body. While neither triumphed, the tension continued to rise, sending his skin writhing madly. Veins throbbed in his forehead and neck, his appearance becoming more and more feral as Lancer looked on. Indeed, those once gentle red eyes held a decidedly slitted look to them now, wide and nearly euphoric with demented glee. Not just that, his very presence felt unstable, cracks of energy bursting beneath the skin with wild abandon. Surely he wouldn't continue this, not unless he intended to. No. Too late he realized his intent. Yes! The explosion hit a heartbeat later. By contrast, this blast was relatively contained. Little more than a sudden pulse of dark red, a shell of ebony cocooning the blonde in shadow. A foul wind carried a plume of dust to the forefront of Lancer's gaze. There one moment, gone the next. 4 tails of the blackest crimson lashed at the ground to shatter it like so much glass. Once more Berserker had vanished. This time, when the smoke cleared, there wasn't so much as a hint of humanity to be seen in him. No, not human at all. A beast. A monster. A creature apart, crafted in the hideous caricature of a human being. The beast turned its gaze upon Lancer. With slow, shuddering steps, those hideous white eyes took his measure and found him wanting. No, perhaps he'd been wrong. There was a hunger to that gaze, an all-encompassing avarice, surpassed only the madness subsuming his form. Again, his gaze was drawn to those 4 tails, now more solid and opaque than ever before. 4 tails, not even half the strength of his noble phantasm. Yet the sight of it rooted him where he stood, unmanned him, threatened to undo his very existence. That twisted maw curled in a rictus of a grin.
Clawed hands dug deep furrows upon the ground, tensing in preparation of a mighty leap. Its entire body shifted, that slumped back arching hideously. A slow, shuddering hiss fled from the ghastly tear that served as its mouth. No more quips emerged from that ghastly maw, no jokes, no witty one-liners. There was only the beast, only the need to attack, to ravage, to destroy. His gaze shifted warily, watching those clawed feet, the thick corded muscles that made up its legs. The attack would come in an instant. A bead of sweat trickled down his brow, his lance rising in preparation.
Agony.
Fire blazed through his left shoulder as the beast barreled past him in a twisted mass of motion. He hadn't even seen it move. Just a red blur, a crimson haze, yet still his shoulder shrieked in agony, demanding his attention at once. Reluctantly he risked a quick glance, never once doubting his chances for victory. Of course he wouldn't lose. This was his land, his territory. He was superior, invincible. So long as he retained this power, no one would be able to match him for long, much less. Aghast, Vlad gaped openly at the ruined bleeding tear that had replaced his elbow.
Clutching the ruined remnants of his arm in its maw, the beast turned. Contemptuously, it spat out the limb and growled. It was the sound of his death knell. Then, it fell upon him and knew. The beast. Jack screamed. At least, she thought she was screaming. Was she? She'd long since lost the ability to tell. Surely she must be. Her throat felt sick and scratchy, scraped raw by her own shrieks, her every cell united in singular agony as she writhed upon the heartless stone floor. Though she grit her teeth against it, a fresh surge of searing skittered across her torso as she curled in on herself, frantically adopting a fetal position in a vain attempt to ward off the forces trying to tear her apart from within. Somehow this only made the pain worse. Too much? It was just too much. Too much. There was too much energy within her small body, too much prana without, with no healthy way to release either. Yet still it came, a near limitless flow of energy channeled through her connection to Naruto. A connection forced wide open by his noble phantasm, one she wasn't able to close. Golden eyes blazed red, and she screamed anew, baring her teeth in a wordless scream as she thrashed. Something was trying to take over her very sense of self, reaching out through their shared bond to tear at her soul. What the hell's gotten into her? Oh, was that Saber's master? It sounded like him. Why was he so angry? What had she done wrong? Distantly, she was aware of rough hands seizing upon her slim shoulders, trying to keep her from hurting herself. To no avail. There were other hands, too. Smaller palms that she recognized as her back arched with a wordless shriek. Spine twisting horribly, fingers clawing at her scalp. Make it stop. In a fit of panic, she seized upon Suzugu's arm. Make it stop, Mommy, the servant wailed. Make it stop. I would if I could, the necromancer sputtered. Holy hell, that hurts. She's gonna break my arm. Jeanne found herself in the same boat, nearly helpless to anything but watch, as the poor girl clung to Saber's master. Her very circuits felt as though they were afire. It was all she could do to control her breathing. Every gasp was fire, turning the air in her lungs to steam whenever she exhaled. Her skin felt superheated, fire to the touch, as she fitfully hugged her arms close to herself. It was only her immense control and pride as a magus that kept her from collapsing on the spot. Command spells were useless here. She was in such pain, such agony, that she couldn't even use one anymore, much less muster up the willpower to do so. Even had she been in her right mind to do so, her servant would have resisted. Such was his maddened state. He'd warned her, hadn't he? Still, she felt compelled to try. Berserker, stop! By the power of my command spell air. White-hot hell snarled down the length of her arm, shattering her concentration. Her body convulsed in a shuddering gasp and collapsed, leaving her clutching at the burning brand that was her hand. With each passing moment Berserker took from her, his noble phantasm a veritable sink that sucked her prana dry. A low, exasperated hiss snaked through her clenched teeth. Just what the hell is going on out there? Perhaps given time to prepare, to muster her reserves, she might have certainly lasted longer. Found a workaround of some sort, a means of alternative energy that wouldn't leave her hanging between the precipice of life and death. But that was neither here nor there. How much longer would she last? 5 minutes. 10 at best. Worse, Jack was linked far more intimately to Naruto than she. The wee sprite depended on him for prana to exist in this world, and now that very prana was burning her alive. No doubt the sudden surge had something to do with Berserker's battle. He'd been pushed too far, too fast by Lancer. In the end, he'd been forced to cast his sanity aside just to survive. Even now she could feel his bloodlust, his fury unleashed with no regard for friend or foe. Never mind, poor Jack. If this continued for much longer,
if he continued fighting in this state,
they were all going to die. Zero. Oh, Shito Shitwishek. E. Upon the battlefield, chaos reigned supreme. There was no order to be had here, no graceful duel conducted with honor and chivalry. Only bloodshed and death. As one might expect of a battle involving 6 servants, this clash surpassed all others before it. Heaven and earth alike trembled beneath their blows. There were none before them, and there would be none after them. There could be no mercy here, no truce, no offer of parley, or any such alliance. There was only death. Only the victor. Or the defeated. Rider of Black was no exception to this rule. Will you please stop? Astolfo cried, twisting out of the way, as a crimson claw nearly claimed her face. Time out! Out! Seriously! Just wait a seckie! A yelp tore out of her as those snapping jaws nearly tore her face off. In desperation, she flung her lance between her and the creature and threw her body out of harm's way. Unthinking, her eyes betrayed her, closing themselves against this nameless horror, trying to kill her. The horrible squeal of torn fabric steel reached her ears a moment later, forcing her to open them again. Rather than lose her pretty visage, she found herself gazing at the ruined tier of her once flowing cape, a good quarter of the peerless fabric bitten clean off by those jagged teeth. "Mo, really?" she wailed, eyes narrow upon the ruin of her beloved cloak. "This was my favorite cape. Do you have any idea how long it will take to fix this Nananata face? How had it come to this?" Mere moments ago, this creature had come crashing into her battle, with Archer without warning, without thought, without mercy to attack them both. Poor hippogriff. It hadn't stood a chance. He'd nearly killed her mount outright before she managed to dismiss it, and she daren't call to it again before it healed, not when doing so meant its death, but at this rate she was going to die, and oh God, it was going to hurt, aha! Spying an opening in the endless stream of clawed crimson swiping at her, Astolfo sprung back on her hands and vaulted away. "Fine, be that way." Alighting upon a scorched hill, she drew herself up, puffed out her chest, and leveled her lance at him. The beast paused, considering her in quiet confusion. It had not expected its prey to strike up such a pose in the midst of battle, much less at a distance where it could be so easily reached. Nevertheless, Astolfo did just that. Let those afar off listen. Those who are near can see. I am one of Charlemagne's paladin. The abomination pounced again, and Astolfo was suddenly very much preoccupied with trying not to become its meal. "Oh, come on. At least let me finish, you big bastard," she sobbed. "I haven't had an opportunity to in so long." Archer was of absolutely no help at all in this running battle that followed. She just stood there, utterly transfixed by the horror Berserker had come, her eyes large and round with horror. Ryder wondered if she would defend herself, should Berserker attack again. No, not Berserker. This seething mass of wrath and spite and hate could no longer be called such. Temporarily deprived of her mount and much of the mobility that came with its unique ability, it was all she could do just to stay out of Berserker's way, much less defend herself.